Welcome to Capes, Cowls and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. And welcome to our weekly spoiler review show of the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Today we'll be looking at the third episode of the show, titled Power Broker, directed by series director Carrie Scogland and written by Derek Kolstad. I am your host, David Oscar. I'm a podcaster and a editor over on Fresh Take Hub, as well as a content creator, and I am joined by our guest for the series, who is a fellow writer and film journalist. It's Stefanos Flakis. Hello, Stefanos.
You know, I never thought that Zemo would be an amazing partner on the dance floor.
He had some moves. He definitely had he knew how to boogie on the dance floor.
This is how Europeans do it, man.
That's very true. Don't mess with Stefanos. If you break him out of prison in the future, he's going to be quietly sipping a alcoholic beverage while calculating his next move.
You kidding me? Once everything is done with the pandemic, I'm going everywhere.
Just get on that private jet, you know.
Oh yeah, with the butler and like all the food that somehow it just. I have so many questions, but I don't mind it.
Yeah, it does make me laugh that these comic book properties often will be like, thank God we have a character who has money, because how else would we get around this, you know? Just Sam and Bucky like hiding in cargo on a passenger flight or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like the idiot of the group, but I never thought that Baron was not his name. I really thought it was his actual name, but I never thought, oh, Baron as a Baron and a Baroness. Of course, It makes sense.
I guess I always saw it as a title, but I saw it more as a supervillain title rather than an actual, he is actually a Baron. So, same with like Doctor Doom. You don't think of him like, you're like, oh shit, yeah, he's an actual doctor, whereas you just think it's like a fun, evil name. So, yeah, I do like it when they do stuff like that. It's pretty clever. So, we'll go first off into our overall thoughts about this week's episode as we continue to go on the adventures of Sam and Bucky. This week, the brief synopsis for it on Disney Plus was that Sam and Bucky go to a criminal safe haven to find information about the Super Soldier Serum. So, Stefanos, what are your thoughts about this week's episode, Power Broker?
I mean, first of all, like we said before the recording, it's called Power Broker and there's no Power Broker to find. That was just bizarre for me. Why did you call it how I say in the synopsis, a safe haven of criminals or something like that? That was just weird. But beyond that, I enjoyed it for sure. I did feel that it was what I wanted from the second episode, but I also felt it happened a bit too fast. But overall, I am very satisfied with it. I also didn't expect a lot of the stuff they did with Zemo. That really took me off the rails, but in a good way. I didn't expect to have a group up. I thought that he was going to be the mastermind who somehow is going to escape by using them. But in reality, they helped him, which I thought was fun, very silly, and I don't see how that would work, but I'm fine with it because it was entertaining. And I think Daniel Brühl is a very good actor. And I'm glad that we're seeing a bit of charisma from him, and especially going with the other two leads. But yeah, I have far more positive things to say. There are some negatives, as we're gonna analyze them later on. But yeah, also the ending confirms my bloody theory that I've been having for 2 weeks, and I was so happy that I get some level of validation.
Yeah, exactly. I when I was listening to last week's episode, I came across that part and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. That's a good theory. That's it, good aspect. And maybe it's just because I haven't been looking out as much for theory pages and different articles written about this series as much as WandaVision to not get into that trap. But I haven't seen anybody or people picking up or talking about that. So I think that's going to be a nice surprise for people, which again we'll talk about later in the episode. But yeah, kudos to you for picking up on that, Stefanos. Yeah, for myself, I think that it's kind of similar to my feelings on last week's episode. So while I really appreciated the first episode for how much it went into where these characters are right now and talking about who they are as characters and setting up their different sort of worlds and what situations they were in, I'm still a bit torn on the direction that the story is going in. I think that there are elements that I'm definitely enjoying and I think that are really strong. But then there's other times throughout the episodes where I'm left asking, well, why are we seeing this? Why are we going here? And I think it does also come down to a bit about what you and Jake were talking about last week, which is sometimes what these superhero series can struggle with is the aspect of telling this big story over several episodes. It's whether you make them work as individual episodes or whether it just seems like a movie, like split into parts. And I feel that that was still definitely the case here. I feel that there's definitely like a strange sort of pace and tone to the series. So even though it gives us a lot of great moments and a lot of great action, I'm still not quite clicking with everything. I'm not watching it going like, oh, I'm loving every minute of this. Whereas I think the benefit to something like WandaVision was because it was so new and different and we had never had a Wanda or Vision based film, you didn't have anything to compare it to. So I think here as well, you're seeing a lot of visuals and a lot of storytelling tropes which were very much strength of films like Winter Soldier and Civil War. So it's hard not to compare the series to those movies, if you know what I mean, especially when you've got a character like Zemo showing up.
Yeah, I guess also the irony to all this is the fact that a big part of the story is about Sam and Bucky kind of trying to surpass their feelings and their past with Steve and becoming their own people. But the same thing can be said about the show itself because it feels very much like a Captain America film, but it it either tries too much to be one, or it or by also the same time try to be completely not that. And because of the medium, it feels not restrictive, but definitely a very strange balance that it doesn't go either way. And especially for this episode, I felt like it was two different episodes of plots all mashed into one. While in the previous episode, that could have just easily just been like the first half of an episode.
Ich habe keine Ahnung, wovon du sprichst. Die Amerikaner seid Unmenschen geboren. Says it doesn't know.
Bullshit. It's bullshit. We know she came through here. Now where'd she go? Do you know who I am?
Yes, I do, and I don't care.
But let's now go to our episode breakdown to talk more specifically about elements in the episode. And like I said, there are a lot of strengths here. And as you said, Stefanos, there's a lot of other problems. So we'll go straight into it now. So we start off, we see that in a campaign to track down the flag smashers. Well, first of all, actually, we start off with a GRC sort of advert, don't we? So before we even get to the
propaganda. They're all of the propagandas.
Before we even get to the John Walker stuff, there's actually this GRC ad, which again I thought was a weird opening, considering that nothing really ever tied back to that. Because as soon as we saw that, I thought, oh, cool, we're going to start getting into the GRC stuff, how that's kind of influencing things and how potentially that's a corrupt organization. But that didn't really lead to anything. What did you think of that first sequence?
Like I said, like Yoshi said, I was kind of hopeful that I was thinking, that, oh, finally, we actually can have the villain. Because I was thinking that maybe GRC will be the actual villain in all this. But what we ended up being is kind of like, I think because I think overall this episode, if there's one word that they use a lot and they kind of describe it, is hypocrisy. And GRC has very much proven to be that. And the fact that the immediate next scene is the new Captain America bursting into actually in a foreign country in a home and just harassing people. I think that's part of it. But yeah, I didn't feel there was huge relevance because in the end of the day, uh, this new cap is far more on the military and I imagine on the UN, the GRC. I'm not certain if he is working for the GRC. They didn't make it very clear, and but I still have the hopes that most likely that organization is the real villain in all this in some capacity. Like to be honest, I could even see the GRC actually is working with the power broker or something, because that will make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, after this, strange advert, then we go to a hideout in Munich, which has been used by the anarchists and the flag smashers. We then see that John Walker is infiltrating this place with his sort of like small task force. The man inside speaks German, so they bring in Lamar Hoskins to work as a translator. And, they find out from that guy that the group has unfortunately ran away, and we see that John Walker is definitely not happy about this. We see that the man he's sort of questioning sort of spits in his face, and he has this moment like, do you know who I am? And yeah, you start to think like, oh, are we now starting to see the exterior be peeled away, and are we starting to see now the true character of John Walker, which I think again I was looking forward to seeing more of that potentially in this episode. I was quite sad that we only really saw cut back to them once, really, was it? But I still enjoyed the fact that we were starting to see him be chipped away now, to start to see him have this sort of ego about him, and maybe even potentially Lamar is starting to question his methods or what they're doing, because ultimately they just want to get the job done to look good, but also they're racing against Sam and Bucky because they don't want to be outsmarted by them, essentially. So, what did you make of this scene with John Walker? Did you have the same reaction? Or
Yeah, like to be honest, I really like that opening. Because I also like the guy, the owner. I wish we had a name for him because I did like his reaction, because we only see him in two scenes and we see that vast difference to the one and the other. The one supposedly a terrorist group, and he's actually very positive, very homely, and overall enthusiastic about them. And then we see the supposed good guys and completely respect. And the whole thing, oh, he says, like, I know who you are and I don't care. Which, like, for starters, I didn't say that. Overall, I don't have the best opinion about America because I was raised uh, during the Iraqi War. So obviously, all of us Europeans, we do not have a good opinion for Americans. And this kind of, and especially John Walker's reaction, that is actually very reminiscent to army veterans that were to the Middle East, that had that kind of attitude. So, which it's a very interesting perspective, because even though it is a show with a flying shield that's coming back to you, and metal suits flying around, that's for some reason felt way too real to me, because this is kind of what I would have expected from a military guy to become captain.
yeah, it could actually turn into a kind of American Sniper situation, isn't it? Where everyone lauds him as a hero and this great soldier, in which a lot of people maybe outside that situation or aren't as pro-military or war would look at it and go, he did some pretty bad stuff. So, there definitely could be that sort of angle with this story. And you see that a bit with the man that they question, because he says, you Americans have just become sort of like thugs. So again, like putting the emphasis on what Americans have become, which I thought was quite interesting as well. So yeah, we'll see how that evolves. But I think we definitely got some good glimpses here, and I hope that we get a lot more screen time for John Walker in the future. But after this, I found this, I thought it was interesting that we didn't actually go to the title here. So when we watched the next sequence, it was then after all of this other stuff happens, they then bring up Falcon Winter Soldier, and I was like, oh crap, I kind of forgot that we hadn't seen the title card yet. It's, when those shows sometimes have like 15 minutes of story and then bring in the title card, and it's a weird thing that American series do sometimes. You're like, oh, why did you wait all this time to bring it in? So I don't know why they didn't bring it in after maybe the John Walker scene. But yeah, the scene anyway that happens after this, but before the title card, is that we are in Berlin, and Bucky has decided to visit Zemo, as they teased in the last episode. He visits Zemo, who's in his cell on his own, and Bucky says that because of their shared history with Hydra, then he would be the better person to speak to Zemo rather than Sam, who is essentially an Avenger, or was an Avenger. So he thinks that he can speak to Zemo more because they have that similar beliefs about super soldiers, and there might be some sort of, I guess, connection already there for that, also like sympathy, which I think in a way is true, and I think that's quite clever on Bucky's part, and I think it's quite good that he's in some ways willing to face his demons almost, because as we very early on see, he's already trying to test him and see if the code works, the code names so work on him, which obviously they don't. So, Bucky is already sort of bringing himself face to face with somebody who's caused him trauma in the past. And let's not forget, actually, that he was on his list, I believe, in episode 1, wasn't he? Zemo, of his people he was writing down on that notebook. So, maybe there's some ulterior motive that Bucky wants to get him out of prison as well.
Well, the thing is, because unfortunately there is like one shot in the trailers that kind of shows that there is gonna be some kind of confrontation between the two. I don't know. I'm not very certain about the context of that shot, especially after watching that episode. But yeah, like you said, I didn't really think about that. Zemo might actually feel some level of remorse to what he did to Bucky, because the thing is, like, whenever I think about Zemo back in Civil War, I always think about the bad things he was doing. But then, as I was watching the episode, I was always being reminded to some of his pieces of dialogue, especially the one that he had with Black Panther at the end, where he does say that, "I'm sorry for your father. I didn't want to do this. I it was one of the collateral damages." And yeah, and I remember that. Oh yeah, he did this because he thought he was doing a good cause, or kind of revenge for losing his family. And in reality, he didn't want to kill anyone, although he did kill several people, which it does bring. It makes me be conflicted for some scenes later on, but yeah, like, it was a good touch, so especially for Bucky, and I think he kind of understands that where Zemo was coming from, but still, like, I kind of I want to see more of it. I definitely want to explore Zemo's actual psychology and morality, because who knows? I mean, apparently 5 years have changed a lot of people, and based on this episode.
Yeah, I think Zemo is definitely an interesting character, because especially in this episode, they kind of take the persona of Zemo in Civil War and place that into this show. So he's there being the cold, calculating villain that he is in Civil War, and they go, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to see this guy in a nightclub, as we joked earlier, but also let's see how many contacts he has, how he works within the sort of the crime ring and all that kind of stuff. So like you said, it'll be interesting then to see, like John Walker, if we start to see him sort of unraveled a bit more, rather than just sort of playing this sort of cliche character of like, oh, I'm always deceptive and I'm always sort of scheming, and the way he delivers his lines, even sometimes I felt, especially like on the plane, it was kind of almost comedic in some ways, that he was playing just very typical Zemo, like, so Zemo describing a great album of modern art but he describes it in a very Zemo way. So that's what I'll also be interested in to see, is that whether he'll stick to being the kind of typical villain and typical Zemo we know of being this like whole calculating person, or whether he'll actually become more of a fleshed out character by the end.
I do have the fear that they might actually do a complete reversal and actually make him into an sort of anti-hero. Like he has a good cause and he's learning, but he does not afraid to pull the trigger on an unarmed man. But again, it's one of those things which I could see as a possibility and it could work, but this is the chance of really doing like taking the classic Zemo character and making him to a full out villain. And if they do that, then I would like to keep him for the rest of the franchise because I think he has great potential of being a recurring villain.
Yeah, well, again, it's kind of like I always refer to, Magneto. Again, he's not, again, a sort of typical villain because he's doing it because he believes in the movement and, the deep beliefs that he holds. So he has to do villainous things in order to achieve them, but he's doing it purely because he wants a better life for his people. So it's almost similar to Zemo. A lot. It's like you said in that scene. He apologizes to T'Challa for what happened to his father, but he sees it ultimately as just a casualty of the sort of mission that he's fighting for. But what I thought was interesting here as well is that you have Bucky, come up to the glass. He tests him with the words and sees that they don't work anymore. And at that point, Bucky tells him that there's a new group of super soldiers running around and he needs his help. And Zemo makes it very clear to him that, I'm the person you want to be involved in this because I can tell you exactly where to go. So he's already sort of influencing him and encouraging him to help him get out of prison, etc. But what I found interesting as well is that they keep saying, oh, there's some super soldiers running around. And that's where I think it gets a bit messy sometimes. I'm like, look, are the villains like super soldiers or are they flag smashers? Because by making flag smashers super soldiers, it kind of muddies things a bit, because you're like, well, are we going after them because they're super soldiers or are we going after them because they're flag smashers? And what does them being super soldiers hold as a threat? Because at this stage, we haven't really seen them cause any major damage or hurt anybody particularly at this stage. It's not like in Winter Soldier, in which you've seen that, this character has come along and has killed a major character or has killed a bunch of people.
Like I think the main reason why our leads do this mission because they are super soldiers. It's far more for them. It's the fear of what someone would do with that kind of power. But then you become the question: why is someone like John Walker interested so much? Why, especially actually, why the government is so interested to send him to do this job? That's why I'm hoping that the GRC are the villains that they started all this, because that would make far more sense. It would bring actually a lot more depth to all of the stuff that we were introduced to. But yes, but that is the big question because also, like I said, the Flag Smashers haven't done at that point something big. Like if anything else, they're just like another extremist group. Nothing huge or different, or especially like nothing peculiar. Especially when we go to, it's not Singapore. It's fake Singapore.
Madripoor.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it fake Singapore.
Yeah.
and especially we go there, we see actually some far more threatening people than the Flag Smashers.
Mm.
So yeah, like it will make far more sense that like everything, like the Flag Smashers are just the very unfortunate people who got there in the wrong place at the wrong time, got these powers, and now they're haunted by everyone because they stole from the wrong people. Like that seems where they're heading. But I like that Zemo has a philosophy. He doesn't want anyone to have this kind of power. That's why he killed all the Winter Soldiers, because he didn't want them to be released and it cause more mayhem. So I understand his perspective, where he's coming from. And to be honest, if he doesn't go all the way to try to kill those flag smashers, then I will be a bit disappointed, and I would say maybe it's a bit out of character.
Whoa. Whoa. Hey, what are you doing here?
I didn't want to tell you because I knew you wouldn't let this happen, okay?
What did you do?
We need him, Sam.
You're going back to prison.
If I may.
No!
That prison break was stupid.
Yeah.
There were so many things. Like, I understand, like they did show from before with the guard, him being in front of the camera, saying the password. I know they did that just because then they're showing Zemo doing the same, because obviously he has started them. But still, man, this is like a max security prison, and he just escaped because two guys were fighting. I mean, come on, even with Bucky's help, that was too easy.
I know, and it wasn't that much help as well. And like he was also like, oh, if you have two guys start a fight, then there's one guard on the two guys, and then if another two guys, then there's a shortage of guards, etc.
Which, to be fair, I would have loved if they had like another scene before saying that, oh, there's a strike or something with the guards, or because of the blip, a lot of people had to take holidays, or to leave to be with their families, or stuff like that. That would have been far more believable because it would have been on the right spot at the right time. But I don't know. That definitely feels like a network show, which it's just convenient for the plot.
That's what I was going to say. It was just basically just a way to get him out of there. And like you said, it's funny. It was almost like Days of Future Past in a way, that you have a character who is broken out of prison. So I was mentioning Magneto earlier, and then they go to like a private jet and get on the jet and talk about, the rights and wrongs of different characters and that kind of stuff. I was like, I'm getting major Days of Future Past vibes off this, but
oh god, I never thought about that in the film. True, because they just escaped one of the biggest prisons under the Pentagon, and the government did nothing afterwards.
It was kind of believable there because you had essentially four superpowered beings, whereas again here it was just kind of Zemo did most of it just by putting on a different outfit and sort of hiding indoors and that kind of stuff. So like you said, I think it just needed a bit more grandiose to it to sort of make it a bit more believable, rather than this kind of small prison which just gets the better of them because a fight is going on and Zemo manages to disguise himself. It seemed like you said, with the whole password thing and everything, you would hope that they would be a bit more clever than that, especially because in the MCU we have seen that underwater prisons are a thing. So are you seriously going to suggest that like you put like Falcon and Hawkeye inside an underwater prison, but you don't put Zemo in one? It seems a bit bizarre, but again, we'll buy into it for the case of the show. But yeah, once we get our introductions to Zemo with Sam and Bucky, and he talks about how he has, no intention of leaving his mission incomplete in terms of the super soldiers, then we see them go to Madripoor after getting on their jet, and he says about him being a baron, and Sam was like, oh, so you got money? And he's like, yeah, I am a baron, which again was a great line. And we see to the level of he's got like a butler and all that kind of stuff, which again I bought into because it made sense because of his background. Often people who come from money will often get involved in law enforcement or the army and that kind of stuff, so that kind of made sense. And it also makes more sense why he could do all the things he did before, why he's got certain contacts. But it did make me also question why his wife and child were in Sokovia, because that seemed like a pretty poor area. So I don't know why did they just have like the nicest house in Sokovia or something like that? Because the place that sort of went up into the air and thrown down back to the ground didn't look like the most wealthy of areas. So that I was a bit confused about. But
yeah, because he also said that it was also his father with them.
Yeah.
And based again on the trailers, we know that we are going to see the monument, the statue that they built on Sokovia. later on.
That's mentioned
So,
in this episode as well, isn't he? He says, have you been to the monument, etc. So yeah, we're definitely leading up to that. But once we get all of this, we are then taken to Madripoor, as we mentioned earlier, which is, or you said was a fake Singapore. And
but it is fake Singapore. Are you kidding me? Like the safe haven for pirates. I mean, come on.
Exactly. So, but I do have to say, this place looks great. You know, I'm really impressed with the visuals of this. You know, creating this kind of fake city with the sort of neon. You got a really nice looking bridge, kind of like with Sokovia and other countries and locations we've been to before. You do kind of question, is this a real place? I thought that was pretty good. We told that this is a criminal sanctuary located in the Indonesian archipelago, where the three assume the identities of the local criminals for a disguise. We see that Sam has become somebody who looks exactly like him. What was he called? Like Smiling Tiger or something like that, is it?
Yeah, which again, once again, so dumb. This is so dumb, but I'm okay with it because it's Anthony Mackie. He's charming and he's good with comedy, so it works. And although to be honest, I did see the photo again of the real guy, and I'm like, I see some similarities, but to be honest, if someone knows him, they will know it's not the same person. I mean that's okay. That's just definitely the thing that I found a bit off, especially when the bartender was looking at him, and obviously he kind of recognized him, but and then I'm like, no, you don't. That's no. He's not even trying to hide his eyes. If he was wearing glasses, maybe, but come on, man.
Yeah, I think it's just the idea of, again, these are kind of larger than life criminals. So I was kind of willing to buy into that in the sense of you are dressed this way, and as long as you carry around the performance of the role, then people won't sort of bat an eyelid. It's once you sort of like drop the facade, then people will sort of question you. So I kind of like that aspect. It's like you can actually do a lot by just, even if you didn't look exactly like them, it's the kind of trick of the mind, and that people might again sort of see you and interact with you and be like, something's not right here. But again, they're not sure enough to actually call it out or do anything, because at the end of the day, do they want to just get into a fight, or what can they do?
Yes, but the bartender knew his favorite drink.
Yeah.
If a bartender knows the favorite drink of a person, that means they know them.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the one thing which is a bit like, because he is watching him so much at that point, especially. But it did lead to a nice comic moment. We also go back to Carly. She's at the GRC camp in Riga, comforting and mourning her dying mother. So again, this is the parts in which, are these the villains? Because we're now meant to be sympathizing with these characters. And it also kind of gives me the vibes of similar to the actress in Solo, because Erin Kellyman was the Wind Riders? Is that what they were called in Solo, A Star Wars Story?
Yeah, it's the supposed first people that started the rebellion, which based on canon, there were like so many people who started the rebellion, so I don't know anymore.
But it was just the fact that it seems almost as if she's playing the same kind of character here. It's this, oh, they're the villains, we must chase after the villains and you must stop them from doing what they're doing, to later find out like, oh, actually they were trying to do some good and these other people are the villains. So I'm kind of just a bit confused as to why Disney would want to do that twice in two of their own properties, which are both sort of very similar to geeky, very properties which have similar audiences, and then just to cast the same actress for kind of the same role. That's where I'm concerned about. Are they just going to go down the stereotypical route of like, oh no, the Flag Smashers are trying to do something good? Because, like I said, is it that they're just trying to make Carly a more sympathetic villain, or are they actually trying to sort of humanize him, or to later set up the fact that these are just, in a way, like you said, an extremist group, but are not actually trying to do anything actual evil? The only evil thing she's done is that she did actually kill Redwing, and we still haven't seen any
Well,
sign of
after
Redwing
that point,
returning yet.
well, after that point, because later on she does do something more extreme, which
Mm.
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But I completely forgot she was on Solo until last week. I'll be more honest. I completely forgot about that plot line in Solo until last week. So, so yeah, like it's for what you said before. Why would Disney do that? Maybe because not a lot of people remember Solo.
Yeah. they
So
that does
I will
happen a
say
lot.
that.
They're kind of like, oh, we like this storyline, we like this character, and let's take it and put it in something else. So it would make sense in that sense.
So far, main problem with Carly is the fact that we don't actually have a scene with her or of her. It's far more, we always, whatever we know about her, we hear it from other people or from a or for a voiceover. Like we never really see her as a person. And it's a problem because this is some great potential. Like there's a part of me that really cares for her, but only cares for her because other people are telling me to care for her.
I love these.
Cheers, comrade.
This, leads us back to Zemo, Sam, and Bucky, who eventually enter a bar. This is the scene which we were talking about earlier, where Sam has to drink this like strange drink, which is made from like parts of a snake, because it's the character that the person he's playing's favorite drink, and it's like you said, it works because Anthony Mackie is such a great actor, so he does a fantastic job here of being like, yeah, that's great, and that he has to sort of put on this facade. That's very fun. But then when they want to sort of get a meeting with this character Selby, then Zemo pretends to sort of initiate the Winter Soldier to start in and fight and prove in who he is to get an audience with who they want to see. Once they meet this Selby character, who's this kind of like British woman that...
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah, exactly. Zemo says that Barnes is, he uses him as a bargaining tool essentially to get information from her, so she can have the Winter Soldier if she tells them where the Super Soldier Serum is coming from, and she tells them that Dr. Wilfred Nagel is the one responsible for the recreation of the serum, having been hired by the Power Broker. So again, we've had Power Broker mentioned within this story, and we're being told about the Dr. Wilfred Nagel, so we're told who has created the serum. So we're starting to get the breadcrumbs, if you will, which starts to lead them certain elements and lends itself, I suppose, to that aspect of the show, is that kind of buddy cop, mystery, detective aspect of like, oh, let's go here and let's go there, we find out information off different people. But before Selby can offer Nagel's location, unfortunately, she is shot. Their cover is already essentially blown by that point anyway, so we then see that they have to like immediately leave. And I don't know if you had vibes of this, but when they were leaving then and like they're like, a bounty's on our head, I was just getting flashbacks to that Mandalorian episode in which like all the devices, the trackers start going off when Mando steals the child in season 1, and it's like that entire town then is basically all after Mando.
But actually, what I thought immediately was John Wick.
Yeah, it does have a lot of, especially in the sort of cinematography and look of it, I suppose. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
and all the neon lights and the fact that it's a city of killers and hitman, and it really brought that.
Yeah.
Which always a welcome thing, because I love the John Wick films. And I do have to say that the phone call scene is a great way to build suspense. I will have to give credits to that. Which also, what the hell, Sam? Why the fuck do you have your phone, especially not silent, in operation?
Yeah. I just like the fact that he answered and she was like, hey, we need to talk. It wasn't like, oh, hey, Sam. And so like you've got that tension throughout it. Like, why wouldn't she say his name? And then she says it at the end. So then you're like, oh, so you have sort of been waiting for that and you've been questioning why it hasn't been said. But I'm surprised that Sam didn't do something to kind of indicate to her that something else was up. You know, when characters in certain TV shows or films will kind of deliberately say something out there or try and hint to the character on the phone or in front of them, they're like, get out of here, or, you know, that kind of thing. So, but again, maybe that would have been a bit too gimmicky or a bit stupid, but mainly as well, it acts as a way of them getting into trouble and getting more people on their back. So we have the idea that then Selby is killed, and as they're leaving, more people are being alerted to the fact that there's a bounty on these 3 people. But thankfully, a mysterious figure guns down several bounty hunters, later revealing that it's Sharon Carter. So what did you think of Sharon's introduction here and when she came into the episode?
Well, here's the thing. Is it actually Sharon? Because definitely Sharon in the end. But was she the one with the snipe? Because that was the thing that I was really skeptical about. Because later on, we do see another one with the sniper killing some other thugs. So the question is it really her who killed all the people in the building?
Yeah.
But again, but beyond that, because to be honest, I think it's like it could go both ways. But as for the introduction, or I should say reintroduction, she's very different. To be honest, I didn't even expect to get that kind of attitude from her, to be honest. Like, but again, to be honest, they didn't really get to know her that much back then. Although, but again, the fact that she was just such like one of the most loyal people to Cap and to Shield, it did seem almost extremely off character on her attitudes. But again, it's been 5 years, which I think I'm starting getting why we had that time jump on Endgame, so they can have the possibility of going on different directions with some of the characters.
Yeah, potentially with the sniper stuff. Obviously, at the end, we kind of see her with this other character as well. So potentially there's something going on there, whether it's something like the CIA or she's got some sort of task force involved. We don't fully know. But the idea is that kind of she's helped them out of that scrape. We then, like you said, we've learned that because she stole Cap's shield and helped Falcon to get like his wings back and everything in Civil War, then she was made a fugitive and had to, live then out in this place, Madripoor, because it's somewhere, she wouldn't be apprehended for what she's done. So she essentially can't go back to the States. So she definitely has a lot of resentment for Zemo and is kind of really like against the system now. She's sort of saying to Sam and Bucky, it's funny that you used to be, Captain America's sidekick, and all of that is kind of bullshit. And she could kind of be like our window into that idea of the GRC being corrupt, etc. She could kind of be aware of that and be the character that sort of reflects that cynicism of like a government body like that. But again, we'll see what sort of role she is playing. I think that it is interesting. I'm glad they didn't bring her in like they did in Winter Soldier and Civil War, in which she's just like, hey, I'm still working for the CIA, or I'm still doing this, because like you said, is that you want to have consequences from these films, and you never want it to just be like she's broken the law, but then it's like, oh, how convenient, she just got away with it, because it does bring in an element of, especially in a show which you've already said, Bucky is being pardoned by the president. You don't want somebody else who's like, oh, I've also been pardoned, he's fine, oh yeah, he's cool. In order to get their help, Wilson offers to Sharon a pardon in exchange for helping to track down the doctor's location, which she accepts. So they go to a shipyard where Carter brings them to Nagel's laboratory, hidden inside several shipping containers. So here now we're starting to see them follow the bread crumb trail. Something I will also say, though, is that them bumping into Sharon does seem awfully convenient. It's like you said, the fact that Madripoor is this place of bounty hunters and criminals, and it's just like, oh, what, you just happened to bump into Sharon? Like, she just happened to be in this exact same criminal city? I'm sure there's many places in the world like Madripoor in which she also could have been hiding out. So it did seem incredibly convenient that she just immediately found them and then was immediately like, yeah, I can tell you exactly where this scientist is. It's like, how does everyone know this?
Yeah, it definitely was, like I said, extremely convenient. From all the bars from this huge city, they just found her. And yeah, and to be fair, like another thing I wanted to add about Sharon is I really love the factor of the fact that she was not pardoned, but everyone else did, and which I like that. Which again, the theme of hypocrisy of the system, and which is always great. Anything that to to criticize American politics is amazing for me. But it was a good addition because again, it's something very much like Zemo says that if actually Zemo and Mysterio in a way, like if you're not a superhero, you don't matter in a way. Like your opinion and your role within the society and the rules of power mean shit. And I really like that. And I do need, and I believe that Sharon wasn't blipped during those 5 years, which that means that during even then, during the basically the apocalypse, they still let Cap and the remaining Avengers who were exiled back to the country, but not Sharon's, which if that's the case, then I understand her cynicism to everything. It's definitely an aspect which I did not expect when we started the show. I thought we would get, you know, more or less the same from her, but far more action sequences. Which, by the way, great stuff. Like this is some great action, and I didn't even believe that was Disney Plus because with a bit more CGI blood, this could easily become R-rated.
Yeah, I was thinking that's weird because
And
we've had the Snyder Cut, we've had Invincible, we've had so much R-rated superhero content lately. It was weird not to see it in a way, but they were really walking the line in this one in terms of how much they could do, etc., with Sharon's action scenes especially.
yeah, and also extremely bizarre to have a sort of club scene
Mhm.
in an MCU thing. It's still baffling my mind that this happens. Also, the fact that Sharon is the one who organized it, which then I have more questions.
Yeah.
Like, it's where I thought I was really solid with how the world and the universe works. Now I just don't know what's happening, and I want to know everything. I want a TED talk from
Yeah.
Sharon to how she organized these kind of parties in a criminal city.
Hey, guys. I found him.
Here we go.
But we see then as they go through these shipping containers, they find the lab, and Sharon is then outside keeping an eye out. She's sort of facing off against the remaining bounty hunters. Like we said, this is where we see a lot of the action. Some of this, again, it kind of just it works for something like The Mandalorian, but it does bug me when you just kind of get these generic thugs in which I don't know why the show didn't really set up like a better foe for them to face off against. Like, why didn't they just make it like Selby was some kind of cartel criminal empire, and then it could have just been their criminals were after them, rather than this whole idea of just like lots of random bounty hunters which are just being alerted on their phone. It's kind of the same with Mandalorian. It's like, oh, it's just some other bozo in a helmet or just some other kind of random alien. It's just the fact that like a bunch of people in just like, oh, I'm evil because I'm wearing like a leather jacket and I've got, oh, I'm a skinhead, and they're just kind of randomly showing up at this shipping yard container hoping to what, just take down like 4 people with just, a handgun or something. It just I don't know, it seems a bit strange. I get what they're kind of trying to do. They're kind of trying to make it the kind of crime show, and it's like, oh, they're on the docks, they're at the shipping yard, and all these bounty hunters are after them. But again, sometimes it's a bit hard to buy into when you've previously seen these characters facing off more against like armies or bigger threats. So, But again, it made for some fun action with Sharon. But what did you think? Did you sort of buy into the whole action that was happening outside of the lab?
Listen, after the prison break, I just accepted everything.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it?
After that, I'm like, I'm not gonna try too much. Because for one, I really appreciate the action and the stunt work is really impressive. Although I kind of wish we had far more of Emily Van Camp's face, like on some shots.
Yeah,
Because because after a while, you know that okay, this is a stunt person wearing a wig, most likely, and just trying to hide their face while they're doing all this cool action stuff. I did like it. Yes, as you said, it was quite boring because it wasn't really certain to who these people are. I
mm,
initially I thought they were power brokers, thugs, or something.
mm.
But then you could have easily just been just random hit people, just just going to the location that probably they were given by the power broker. But yeah, it is still one of the issues I still have with this show. Like I said before, I need a villain. I need to know who is the bad guy or bad people. Like if it's a whole organization like Hydra, great, that's fine. But right now you're just giving me just random people. Also, even the fact that the show opened with the Leap by Patros,
Yeah,
we opened with him fighting Sam with his small group of terrorists, and there's nothing about that. Like, is this gonna be his role? He's gonna be just the random villain for the openings of each title. Like,
yeah.
I still don't understand to whom am I supposed to be against.
Mm. They do seem to like doing that. They like it's like in this episode they had the whole like you're not going to move the seat forward, are you? So it seems that they like to kind of just be like, hey, and it's like throwback to that. So how that character was the villain at the start of Winter Soldier, wouldn't it be fun if he was the villain at the start of this series? So, but yeah, I definitely agree. They kind of need like an organization, especially when you've got the Flag Smashers, John Walker, the GRC, and then Bounty Hunters. It just gets a bit much.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me to one of the main issues I had actually with both Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Ant-Man and the Wasp, because there were so many different factors in each one of them with antagonists, not necessarily villains, that in the end, there wasn't much left.
But I do have to say, I really thought that the interrogation scene in the lab was one of the highlights. I thought that this worked really well. Like you said, you had that kind of John Wick kind of vibe in terms of the neon lighting inside. It wasn't too goofy. And I thought the actor who played the doctor here did a really good job, because it was here that we got a bit more answers as to where the Super Soldier Serum has come from. So Nagel is interrogated at gunpoint about the serum. He reveals that he was recruited into Hydra's Winter Soldier program after Zemo had killed them in Siberia, only to be brought into the CIA once Hydra collapsed. So he used the blood samples from an American super soldier and was able to isolate the stable particles which compromised the serum. So because the blip happened, again, he took his work to the power broker, who eagerly hired him. And then Nagel later reveals that he was able to produce 20 vials of the serum, which were then stolen by Carly. So I thought this all worked really well. It kind of tracked with what they've been saying. It's connecting stuff in an effective way. It links it to the Winter Soldiers that we saw in Civil War and in Siberia. It made sense about, Hydra collapsing, but then they potentially wanted to carry on the idea of, bringing back this power or this serum, because as we know in the MCU, it's how the Hulk was created, it's how, Bucky was brought to be. So a lot of characters have dabbled in it before, so it makes sense that constantly, there are characters and factions out there which are trying to get their hands on a Super Soldier Serum. And I liked again that we saw the effects of the blip here, that he said, I was working on this and then I was dusted and then came back to find that, the program had been shut down. So I thought that was really good. And And it's just the guy's performance. I thought he did a really good job of sort of not playing like an overly sinister or evil character. He was kind of playing this sort of realistic person and who had allegiances or motives. And I liked his line, which he said about like, not my pigs, not my farm. You know, I just thought that he had some good lines in there, and he just performed the overall role pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It's a good performance, even though it was only like 3 or 4 minutes. And yeah, again, it was effective. It provided necessary exposition. Because unfortunately, this show so far, man of exposition, it hasn't been the best, but this is definitely an important information to give away. And also, I like some of the usage of explanations that he was giving away, saying like the CIA had this test subject, stuff like that, which we all know it was Isaiah, and the fact, like even Sam later on mentions that they didn't even mention him with his own name, and it's he almost like what I said before, that we need to have this one moment of a revelation for Sam and Bucky. This wasn't that, but it was definitely something that kind of combined everything that they've been learning so far, or discovering, or talking about with each other, and that was kind of like came to be almost like an emotional recap for them, that in a way all the stuff is affected one with the other. And yeah, although I do want to say that once he was revealed, because it was on the back of his head, I really hoped it was Tim Blake Nelson from The Incredible Hulk.
I know when I just saw somebody they experimented or something, I was jokingly thinking in my head, it's Reed Richards, he's appeared.
But yeah, like to be honest, like that's just me being me, just saying it would have been cool. It would have made sense because he was in a Hulk film, and I could see Hydra hire him. But anyways, but yeah, no, it was a good scene, and I really liked how it was, not all of it, but I liked how it was back and forth with that scene and Sharon's the fight. I thought that was good.
Yeah, like you said, it the entire scenario and the action stuff all sort of linked together really nicely. It's starting to connect the dots more by linking it to Carly, and that she's using this serum to try and better the situation that she's in. But again, we see it later where she's saying that we were homeless and we were desperate, etc. So it'd be nice to see when we get more context as to what she's talking about. But ultimately, the scene comes to a head when Carter storms in and tells the men that they haven't got much time. Zemo then shoots Nagel, so he kills the doctor. The lab is destroyed by an RPG, which is sent by somebody else. So again, it adds to that kind of just random accomplice kind of goons just randomly showing up like, hey, yeah, I'm just going to fire a rocket launcher for no reason. I'm like, what's this for? Are you trying to kill them? Are you trying to capture them? What's happening? And, a firefight erupts at the shipyard. So we see Zemo slip on the purple mask that we've been teased now in the trailers, and is part of the typical look of the character. He defeats multiple bounty hunters before stealing a getaway vehicle from inside a shipping container, which he sort of rocks up in and allows Barnes and Wilson to sort of jump into. We get a bit more banter between them where they're sort of arguing about, like, you go left, and, Sam says, like, that's in every action movie, and, they get it wrong, so you get more of their sort of dynamic and arguing there as well. But Sharon says that, she won't go with them. She remains behind as long as she can, Sam can stick to his promise that he will get her a pardon so that she can eventually go back to the US. But at the moment, she's still a fugitive. What did you think of the whole purple mask and, this final shootout and action scene?
Well, I'm kind of like, again, I want to know the story behind the mask, because for us, we have a history with it, obviously, and we obviously are excited to see it. But obviously, there is an importance to Zemo with it, so I would like to know more of it. I think it might be just a mask that they were using on the special forces in Sokovia, possibly.
Also, it was in one of the like classic cars he was going around where it showed that, his family was from wealth and he has a fortune. So again, maybe it is like I don't know, I kind of got some sort of like Italian Job vibe from it. The fact that it was in this kind of like old classic car, maybe it's just that his family has got a history within large banking operations or like large heists or thefts, so maybe that's kind of like that was his father's mask or something like that. That I kind of got that vibe. I don't know why. It was just because the fact that it was just randomly, I think, in one of those cars at the beginning of the episode, it just made me think, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a bit more history behind this rather than just he randomly puts it on or, he thinks it looks cool.
Yeah, because especially when we consider that the main thing about the whole show so far is the importance of the shield, of an item. So the item is telling something beyond just its physical form. And yeah, and I wish we get something like that about that mask. Also very good action sequence. It's not too flashy, but it's still impressive. Like I'm glad that we finally see Zemo's work from what he learned from the special forces, because we didn't really get that in Civil War. We did get like his more like the way his mind works, but never his actual physical capabilities. So that was great, but also seeing his brutality. It's which again, we something go back to, to Sharon because she also was brutal to it, but at least for her side, it was survival. He almost didn't need to do that.
No, exactly. That seemed to go into the kind of Magneto element of like, well, he was responsible for this element or this league of people which I don't like and I consider a problem, so I'm wiping him out because I don't want any more of these people. But again, a more heroic or I suppose diplomatic person wouldn't have gone about it in that way. So he's more, again, that extremist part of him.
I do question a bit because when the RPG hit, which by the way, that can be someone from the power broker because why would the power broker want to explode the lab? That makes no sense. But beyond that, Zemo left almost felt like abandoning them, but then he came back to save them.
Yeah, it seemed really weird to me. It seemed like a sort of double cross, especially the fact that he had found the gun and it seemed like he was going to turn on them and use it as a chance to escape. But yeah, then just to come back and the fact that they were like, where's Zemo? Where's Zemo? And then, they don't really question it when he comes back. It was, again, that was where the pacing was a bit strange. It didn't seem like they were filling in all the gaps, like you said earlier.
Yeah, it is definitely something that not threw me off because I do like Zemo and I did enjoy it. But, afterwards, just getting the car and driving it together was then again, I'm like, you just were almost killed by a bunch of criminals and you're going away with this?
Yeah, an open top
everyone,
car.
yeah, everyone will see. I mean, sure, whatever. There was a prison break that happened that was impossible, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was where the tone was a bit off. They weren't going with this kind of like fun, gimmicky kind of like the nice guys, like, oh yeah, like we're jumping into this like old classic car. It's like 1 minute the show is trying to be this sort of serious crime detective show, and then the next minute it wants the banter and buddy cop stuff with Sam and Bucky and like this cool, fun car. So it's where the tone seems to flip-flop quite a bit sometimes, which again I don't think is overall like a massive problem, but it just stops it from being like a really complete show. I think it just works on different levels, but it doesn't work like you don't sort of watch it going like, yeah, this is like amazing, this is perfect.
Maybe I made a mistake.
You did?
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have put it in a museum. Maybe I should have destroyed it.
Look, that shield represents a lot of things to a lot of people, including me. The world is upside down. We need a new cap, and it ain't gonna be Walker. So before you go and destroy it, I'm gonna take it from him myself.
This then leads us to like our final two scenes, and they're two pretty big scenes, as we've mentioned earlier in the show. The first one is that we go back to Lithuania, where we see Carly is still mourning her mother's death. She reminisces with fellow flag smasher Dovich about what their lives were like before the blip, and it caused their displacement. And they then later decide to raid a GRC facility for their materials, aiming to deliver it to the displaced children sitting in the camps. The facility is then set ablaze with people still inside. Meanwhile, Walker and Hoskins arrive in Berlin, only to find out Zemo has escaped, knowing Barnes and Wilson were involved. So, yeah, as we mentioned earlier, this kind of puts a different angle on Carly, because she's now obviously evolved in murder, essentially, because she's killed a bunch of innocent people. Because I think Dovich even says in that situation, doesn't he, like, there were still people in there. And what, like, the excuse she saw used was kind of like, we're always going to come across these people. These are just casualties of the system we're fighting against. So she sees them as the enemy. So again, it's kind of like Zemo. She sees it as a necessary evil because they are ultimately doing the more good, or, you know, what she believes in, but it's ultimately not a morally right thing to do, but she believes that it's the only way to fight against this system. And yeah, it just raises more questions for me in terms of their motives and where they've come from, because like I said, we don't really see these children, which are just, you know, meant to be displaced, so it's hard to really get the connectivity of exactly what they're trying to do for them. And is it meant to be that Carly and the Flag Smashers were displaced? Or is it meant to be that they weren't blipped? Because I thought the idea was meant to be that they preferred the world when it was blipped and this happened, and they want to go back to that. So it seemed weird to me that, again, they're talking about before the blip happened and all that kind of stuff. So I can buy into the aspect that what happened over the last 5 years completely turned everything that happened to them 5 years ago upside down, similar to what we saw with the Doctor and to Sharon and other characters. But it kind of conflicts with the idea that they want things to be the way they were during those 5 years.
I think it means that they weren't blipped, and because of that, other countries were far more open to bring refugees and immigrants, as now there were enough resources. But then everyone came back, so then each government had to choose to keep the ones that been sheltering for 5 years, or just throw them away and bring and welcome back our own citizens, and which is it's a great aspect.
It just seems weird that Carly hasn't lived through that. It seems weird that you wouldn't have characters who had seen the good that has caused, and more have been like disappeared, come back, and then gone, oh, what happened during those 5 years? Oh, this was the way it was. Oh, well, I guess it kind of works. If you were to immediately arrive back into this other world and you were told of how it was when you were gone, then you would fight for potentially that world because you never got to see it for yourself. But it also kind of seems weird to me that you wouldn't have somebody who experienced that and wants to hold on to it because now they've seen the ramifications of what has happened once everything has gone back to normal.
I think the main problem with all this is the fact that we do not see a reasoning or a justification of her crimes. I think I think why it works with Zemo is because we had almost a whole film about the destruction of Sokovia. So we have a very direct reference to it. And and just telling us that, his family was in there, and we're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, the idea of show don't tell, isn't it? And that, they're doing a lot of telling us about what's happened to her, but we haven't really seen anything or get an idea of exactly what she's fighting for.
But even then, they don't even tell us to why she kills. Like that I think that's the other, like, okay, like this organization is letting people starve to death. It's a very good cause, but I don't understand why you need to go to mass murder to go there. I think just, stealing food and giving it to the people in need is enough of a message. Because then when you kill these soldiers, then you make yourself a target to everyone. And
Yeah, it's this show constantly trying to keep them as villains. It's like I said with the character she played in Solo is the fact that throughout the film you're told that like they can't take this away, they're trying to steal this material, and then you later find out that like, oh, we were trying to steal this for a good reason. So in this show it's like they almost want to do the same thing, but they're like, oh well, we need to have something to keep you questioning and thinking that they're evil throughout it. So then you see them do villainous things like that to sort of keep you off the trail that actually maybe eventually they'll be, characters you support.
yeah, and especially during that scene when we see all the soldiers just being basically not hurt, so that basically all of them is just tied down to the ground, and immediately said to myself, "Oh, so they are the good guys. I mean, so far they haven't really killed everyone." 2 minutes later, a huge fucking explosion, and all of them are dead. And so, yeah, which again, it felt so off to me because up to that point, you've given me enough to be on the side, and all of a sudden, like, like even her own people were saddened by that kind of move, and and, and I couldn't really feel why now? Like I understand your mother died, but they didn't really go into that too much. I felt like I missed two scenes, two very vital scenes. And yeah, and again, and it is so sad that I know quite a lot about this group, but I still feel exactly the same way as I did on the first episode. And it's I don't know yet, I don't have an opinion, I need to see more.
Yeah, exactly. So then that leads us to our final scene where Zemo believes he's on the trail of Carly. So that directs them to that location we're told they were in earlier, Riga. There, Barnes separates from Sam and Zemo to investigate some beads that he's found on the street. He says he wants to go for a walk. It's quite a nice moment where Sam says, you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm all good. But as we know, when somebody's like, I need some air, I need to go for a walk, you know that they're obviously trying to de-stress. So it was nice that Sam was sort of showing the concern there. But you do have to kind of wonder, like, hang on, we've already had Sharon arrive into this. We're seeing multiple different characters show up and be revealed. So where is this going? And, is somebody else spying on them? Is somebody else going to show up and be like a villain who's like after them? So I was kind of nervous at that point. But once they showed what it was, I was like, oh, okay, this actually makes a lot more sense. And I think that this is quite clever, especially because, again, after weeks of, WandaVision speculation of people being like, is this character going to turn up? Is this character going to turn up? What if this person turns up? And I actually think here people might have got a reveal that they kind of wanted in WandaVision, because WandaVision didn't really give us any of those like big, like, oh my God, it's this character, apart from maybe Quicksilver, but then that never came out in the way people wanted. So
I think what this actually makes it work though is the fact that it makes sense in the story. It's because obviously like because it's weird that we never really thought of the possibility of having some element of Wakanda here, especially when we knew that Zemo would break out of prison. Like so it kind of makes sense that they would be the ones to be that want to be involved in all this, especially to what it did with the whole story arc with Ulysses Claw in Black Panther. I mean, that was one of the main like moral arguments in the film during the first act. It's like should we kill Ulysses Claw or just give him to our allies? And yeah, and obviously for me, it feels great because again, not a lot of people were saying the possible connection it could have to the Black Panther films, and and then I think it was a really good reveal because even for me, who was a big fan of the world Wakanda, I it took me a while to realize what these beats were, and and also I kind of like that the fact that Bucky immediately knew. And again, it's one of those things that I like. I hope we're gonna get to see how his life was in Wakanda, because apparently for him it was possibly one of his better moments in his life, possibly his better moments since he was transformed into the Winter Soldier. So so I do like that part, and the fact that he's very casual with I think her pronunciation is Ayo.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, so it's important people to know. Obviously, they don't want to get confused with the other Dora Milaje because they are all like bald women. So I suppose I hope that other people wouldn't sort of see this and think that she's like a Koye or someone like that. But she has, she was in Civil War. She was like the great character who sort of put down Black Widow and was just like, move or you will be moved. Yeah, that was a great moment. So, and it's nice that she's shown up throughout all these films. So,
Yeah, and I'm very happy. First of all, like we said multiple times about all these secondary characters to get a moment to shine. Even it's even better when it's the third characters who they have the small moments to be well, it's more than just few minutes of footage. Even though we still got exactly the same amount of footage of her than within Civil War, but hopefully we are gonna get more of her, and hopefully maybe we could get more of Wakanda in general. Because so far this show has really been very much about an international journey. So right now I see no reason to not necessarily go to Wakanda, but at least have more themes of it.
I was wondering when you were gonna show up.
So yeah, I thought this was a really strong way to end it. Like you said, it makes a nice tie with Bucky. It makes sense because he was there. It gives you a bit more insight into maybe his time in Wakanda. So it's nice not just to imagine that he was just there on a farm and he didn't interact with anyone. Of course, he would have like made relationships and become acquainted with the people who live there, etc. So I think that is nice as well. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, definitely, especially the fact that Zemo is still on side with them. And yeah, I just hope that, like you said, this now leads us to start to connect things a bit more. We get a bit more of the connections between the Flag Smashers, the GRC, and especially with John Walker. You don't want to spread yourself too thin, but like you said, you need to bring all of this together. Otherwise, it's just going to seem like too many storylines happening in different places. So I want to see more John Walker. I just want a bit more direction in terms of Carly. I think we need to now see the power broker to maybe get that dynamic of whether she's just the assistant or whether she aligns with what he wants or whether she's just being used by him. And then I think Sam and Bucky need to start to become aware of the situation. Otherwise, they're just going to it's just going to diminish them as characters a bit if they just keep getting sort of dragged around and they're not in control of the events of this narrative. So that's my overall thoughts and what I think of this final part of the story. Steph, what are your final thoughts on the episode and sort of expectations for next week?
It's more or less the same with yours. Like overall, like as mentioned throughout the episode, what I really want to see later on, but especially for this, the fact that this very short scene, actually, it's not even a scene. I would even say it's one shot. It's a 10 second shot adds so much possibility to everything, and I really hope they go there because surprisingly, but also not, having someone from Wakanda really rich enriches a lot of the storylines and arcs of characters. Like for one, you have, as we said, Bucky for the actually being one of the few positive moments in his life. And then for Sam, the fact that we've seen how much he struggled as an African American in his own country, but then we have an actual country who thrives with its own black culture and black beauty, and how that could maybe correlate between them, like maybe being a what if scenario not the animated show, like a what if scenario for Sam if he was there, but also what is their opinion about Sam and America as a whole, or what is their opinion about Captain America? Because there's a possibility they didn't even care about the shield or anything, just cared about Steve. And then for Zemo, it's interesting because before we saw her, he was saying about the hypocrisy of the Avengers of not going back to Sokovia to see the statue. Although there is a hypocrisy on himself because he has done some horrific events that they have uh, shaped and almost brought a national trauma. I mean, yeah, the murder of King T'Chaka is the catalyst to what happened in Black Panther with Killmonger and everything. That was the starting point. So, it's there's so many ways that could take this, and I hope they're not gonna miss that opportunity because it's not something like a WandaVision, which we had just theories of because we knew things from the comics. This is something that they mention their own. It's a direct reference. It is an actual character in that world, and I hope they are going to do something with it.
Yeah, and I think it also lends itself to what Kevin Feige and other members of Marvel have said in the past, is that, these will be essential viewing if you are following the MCU and you want to know what's happening. But they said you can still go film to film, so these are filling the gaps. So I think it would make sense, like you said with your theory, if you saw then Sam or Bucky in Wakanda in something like Black Panther 2, because somebody could quite easily watch that after watching Endgame and Infinity War and go, oh yeah, Bucky's got a history there. That makes sense. You wouldn't have had to seen that to understand his journey to go in there, but by watching it, your understanding is all that much better, but you can still buy into the journey without necessarily seeing it. And the same as maybe having Sam as Captain America is, the last you would have seen of him in a film is getting given that shield, and then to see him as Captain America next time, you can buy into that. But the series is then able to explore that idea of like, oh, well, what if he wasn't sure about it? What if he doubted himself? What if there were other parties who were interested in the shield? So I think that is clever from a business perspective, but also does actually lend itself to the shows as a whole, because it's not making them too packed and like, you need to watch this because this big climactic end of the world thing is going to happen. It means they can be more focused and character driven, which is, like I say, why I have hopes for a character like Io, having a bit more development, etc. But we shall see next week as we continue our watch through and reviews of The Falcon and Winter Soldier. Thank you all so much for listening to this review. In terms of where you can find us, you can catch myself on Twitter at David Osger. You can also catch a bunch of articles and videos that I work on over on freshtakehub.com. And you can also catch me on other episodes of Capes, Cowls and Masks. Recently, where we did our news episode, where we were covering off the recent Suicide Squad trailer. So go check out our other episodes as well, which include Jake and Tom, or you can check out our previous reviews, which also include Stefanos. So Stefanos, where can we catch yourself?
Yeah, you can find me also on Twitter at syflorakis, which you can find several of my work on Fresh Tech also. And also possible to check my letterbox as I'm giving very short reviews or comments or even phrases of each film I watched in 2021.
Yeah, definitely check it out, guys. It's going to be a lot to watch this year, so you'll want to see what Stefanos is reacting. So yeah, you can also catch this show on Twitter at Cape Cowls and Mask, and you can also catch it on Facebook at Cape Cowls and Masks. If you're enjoying our reviews and listening to us on Anchor, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, leave us some stars, leave a review. It helps us to go up in the rankings. And the best you can do is share this podcast and tell all of your friends this is the Falcon and Winter Soldier review show to listen to. So thank you once again. We'll see you next week, and stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.